can clarify in two rather different ways. I think you can clarify for yourself by looking at what is really a struggle as you practice. So as you meet people in a community, or as you meet people who ask you for help with their problems, sometimes it flows along beautifully, but sometimes you come up across a problem which you say to yourself, well, I'm not sure what the answer is here. I'm not sure how we should be going about this. And the how we should be going about this is not only a practical thing, but it's usually also what is it right to do, what is appropriate to do to deal with this issue. And that's telling you there's what Jane Fenton calls an ethical stress. And sometimes it's because, I don't know about your employers, but my employers very often ask me to do things which I don't agree with, I don't think are right. And that's a stress because your job is against what you believe is important. And sometimes it's a stress because there are so many things that come together that are very difficult to resolve. When I worked with people who are dying and their families, sometimes people would say, I want to go to Switzerland. In Britain, you go to Switzerland to have to have assistance in committing suicide. It's not permitted in England. And so as an official, as an employee of the state, I have to say, well, I can't help you with that, it's against the law. But members of the family are also asked, so do I help a wife or a mother or a daughter who is asked to help with an assisted suicide? Do I help them to think about what they want to do? Do I help them to say no if they want to say no? Or do I say, well, this is a decision for you, let's think it through, and allow them to say yes? And does that break the law? So that's another kind of stressful situation in which there are different points of view which reasonable people can argue about. And people's beliefs and values and faith often factors in that. So these situations of stress identify for you when there's a value issue which you have to work through. And the other thing about value issues is there are no simple answers. There are always questions to be asked and challenges to be made. And the important thing for a social worker is to reserve their professional skill to challenge and for their professional skill to support, to help someone in these very complex situations. There is no answer, it is complicated, but we can help people work through them. Whether it's a community, or whether it's an individual, or whether it's our society arguing about what the right thing is to do. Our profession has experience of these difficulties. So we can say, well, actually, we have come across many people in this situation, and there are these resolutions which would be helpful. So that's another way in which we can deal with our value issues. Well, what strikes me, sorry, I touched the microphone there. What strikes me in my lifetime is the shift from accepting that there is a public responsibility to provide social help, and that people have social rights, and that people have ought to have the public's help and professional help to achieve what they want to achieve as people and as families and as communities. When I came into social work, it was accepted that we as a society had responsibility for helping in those situations. I think that responsibility is not accepted by many political philosophies which are influential at the moment. And so one of the things we have to struggle with is getting public acceptance and political acceptance that there is a responsibility for the social needs. Yes, of course, we help people with their health needs. That's widely accepted. But people have important social needs too, which it's important for our society to respond to. The second really big thing, which I think is new, is the ecological stresses that our society is facing. Climate change, all sorts of ecological issues, which we have both to help to create a collective response, and we have to help people cope with the emergencies and disasters and problems that they face because of ecological change. And there's a third thing which is much more difficult to grasp, I think, but it's about saying how important the social is to our society, how important relationships, networks, other people, collectivity, solidarity, how important this is to people. And every time you get a clown politician doing something stupid, the response of the people is to say, that's stupid, that's ridiculous, what's going on here? And you can see this beginning to happen in Russia at the moment. You can see this beginning to happen in my country because of our present crop of politicians. And I think it's important to see that people's response to the society around them is an important aspect of everybody's life. Social relationships, social engagement, social activity, social participation is so important to everyone. It's not just for a few people who are rich, or a few people who see themselves as important, or a few people who choose professionally to engage themselves in political and collective social activity. It's for everyone, and we have to help everyone be social. I think you have to accept that our cultures and our traditions and our spirituality and our social histories mean that social work is different everywhere. I don't think we should force ourselves to be one thing. So the first thing I think is important to accept there is a diversity of social works, not just one social work. And I think social work has become better at that over the past 20 years. The second thing, however, is that we can learn from the other kinds of social work that people are talking about. I think about the last 10, 15 years in which indigenous cultures in formerly colonized countries are saying, hey, we had a culture, we had traditions, we had social structures which you colonialists, the Spanish and the English and the French, wiped away, some other countries too, and that important countries now, China and America, they wipe away because of their wish to maintain dominance. People are saying, hey, we have our cultures and traditions which should be part of what we are. And it's increasingly saying social work should think about the traditional cultures and values that their history brings them, and that history should be retained and brought into our world. Now, we talk about globalization as something in which everything is pushed together and made, we're all Americans really, but it never is so. And globalization has also made it possible for local people in small groups and small professions like social work to bring together their ideas and publish them, because printing and publishing and communicating through television, through the internet, through social media is so much easier now. So globalization has created the possibility for sharing that never was there at one time. So I think there's a further responsibility that we all have, and that is to try to translate our own cultural ideas from our own stream of thinking so that other people can draw on them. So we say to people, this is how we think, this is what's important for us, and here it is in a way that you can take away from you and change to make it useful to you. And we should all be doing that. We should all be travelling in our minds, in our books, in our journals. We should all be travelling so that we can collect things which we can reinterpret for our own culture, whilst not trying to damage the culture that created it in the first place. And we should try to get people to talk about to create, develop, involve, reproduce their traditional cultures so that we can all learn from them and they can be strengthened in their culture.